100 years have passed since the rise of the Edoran Empire, and its untimely demise following the Great Plague. In these troubled times of quarreling factions and outlaws roaming the land, work is not scarce for a band of mercenaries. The stories of this age have been recorded. They are known as the Wartales.
Hello and welcome, wonderful people. Otto here, finally, with the fabled Wartales Extreme Start Guide. This guide is going to be tailor-made for the Extreme Adaptive experience, which arguably is the most challenging experience in Wartales. Takes into consideration all DLCs that are out thus far, including the Tavern, the Pits, Pirates of Belerion, and the Skelmar DLC. However, really the only one of those DLCs that's going to come into key focus here is the Tavern, which, depending on how much you want to lean on it in the early game, can be a life raft for you, and there are a number of ways that you can really use the Tavern to get your campaign jump started. However, what we're going to talk about today are your main objectives, what your focus should be throughout the campaign, and some of the key locations of early recipes that will make your playthrough a little bit smoother. All right, so without further ado, let's get into the objectives for the campaign. So the first goal that you're going to want to achieve is building a bankroll, because money, you need it in this game. You need it to pay the troops, you need it to buy food, you need it to buy equipment. So building a bankroll is your first objective. Second objective is base of operations. You want an area that's relatively safe to maneuver in, and establishing a base of operations is key to success in the early game. The next thing that I think is really important is horsepower. It doesn't necessarily have to be horses. You can do it with other animals. However, I think horses are the best way to go about it. So long as your horses aren't war horses, they won't increase the number of enemies that you're fighting against. Whereas if you're putting horseshoes on any other animals that participate in the combat, they will increase the amount of enemies that you're facing during each fight. So for that reason, I think the pack horses are the best way to go, and the more of those that you have equipped with horseshoes, the quicker you will be able to maneuver around the map, which will make your travels much safer and more expedient. You can get from place to place a lot more quickly. So horsepower is your next objective. After that, personally, what I like to do, what I think provides a safe way to get your campaign moving, is secure trade route. Initially, you want to establish your trade route from Stromcap to Cortia. You can enter the county of Arthez using a Pitten in order to bypass the Edorian border crossing. So this is something you can do right off the bat, and you don't even necessarily have to start doing bounties. You can essentially make enough money by just transporting goods back and forth between Cortia and Stromcap, if that's the way that you want to go about things. But later on, basically, you can establish a trade route all the way from the Brotherhood Training Grounds in the far north in Drombach County all the way down to the Brotherhood Training Grounds in Arthez, because you'll get slightly better profits from the selling your goods at the Brotherhood Training Grounds, just because they're a little bit further away from where you're purchasing them. But what I've found is in the north, your gems, your spices, and your pottery are going to be worth the most. In the south, scrolls, silver, amber, and cloth are going to be worth the most. And then you get a relatively decent price for furs in Marheim. Early game, Cortia and Stromcap, establishing a route between those two cities will provide you with a little bit of extra income that you can help to sort of supplement your wage expenses. The final objective for your campaign is getting your troop to level 12. Obviously, by the time you've hit level 12, you're well beyond the early game. However, this should be in the back of your mind, and this is your long-term goal, because the sooner you get to level 12, the easier the game is going to be. And why level 12? Well, level 12 was the original cap or max level for your companions, and level 12 is where you unlock the braveries, which are going to make your troop extremely powerful, and most enemies, so long as you have a proper amount of gear on your troop, decent gear upgraded, you're not going to have too many difficulties once you hit that level. All right, let's move on to your focus early game. First thing you want to do is set up your tavern. The sooner you can get your tavern generating money, the better. This is a way to create passive income. You can pull money from the tavern, and there are also other ways, which I've covered previously, that you can exploit the tavern to make your early game that much easier. So first thing you want to do when you roll into Stromcap is purchase the tavern and get it set up. The next focus is weapons and armor, and this is going to be your focus throughout the entire campaign, because the better equipped your troop are, the better the odds will be in your favor. The enemies that you're going to be facing are based on usually the highest level companion in your group, and usually the enemies are 1 or 2 levels above whoever the highest leveled companion in your group. So the better gear that you have will even the odds in those fights. You want to be focusing on gathering the materials for your weapons and armor. Next, you want to focus on hunting and foraging. This is something you can do very easily as you're moving trade goods back and forth. You can, if you have a surplus of food, you can use some of the food that you get from hunting animals to sell to make a little bit of profit that way. You're also going to need the leather from fighting wolves and boars primarily. You don't really want to tangle with bears, in my opinion, early on, because bears can be problematic. They're very tanky and they hit pretty hard. So stay away from the bears, but hunting boars and wolves is a great way to level up your party. It's relatively safe if you know what you're doing, and it's a good way to gather leather, which is a key resource for crafting weapons and armor, as well as you're going to need it for some of your camp gear. Next, resources. I guess this is probably, I don't even really have to mention this. I mean, this is pretty obvious, but as you're traveling, establishing your trade route, you'll want to gather resources along the way. So pretty straightforward, pretty obvious. And then as you're leveling up a little bit and as your gear is improving, start taking some bounties. And one of the things that you can look for early on is those easy bounties that you don't even have to get into fights. Bounties like discover the tomb of the ancients, or there's a few of them, or delivering a message to one place or another. There's a few that don't require you to get into fights, but if you are taking the bounties that get into fights, obviously you want to take the easier ones, because until your crew is fully equipped with proper weapons and armor, you're gonna run the risk of losing companions early on, which has happened to me. I have yet to get through a start of Wartales without losing a couple of companions on extreme difficulty. So just bear in mind when you're taking those bounties to be very careful about which ones you take. Make sure you go into those fights with plenty of valor, and yeah, good luck. Next, camp equipment. This goes without saying, the camp equipment is very important. We're going to do an episode completely focused on the camp equipment, some of the key equipments to look for early on. But for now, Just focus on your basic camp equipment, just getting the essentials upgraded when you have excess resources. The primary focus is using those resources on the weapons and armor. But when you have more resources available, getting that camp equipment, especially the strategy table, down is very important. Getting those equipments, the camp equipment, upgraded. Next thing is recruits. And again, we're going to do an episode focused primarily on recruits, where you can recruit some of the special companions throughout the early game. Some guys that you can get for relatively cheap to add to your group. But you want to start getting a couple of recruits. And I would say like the optimal party size is probably somewhere in between 7 and 11 companions, I'd say is optimal. As the early game pushes on, within like probably the first 10 hours, you should be able to start opening some trade posts. These will make your life a lot easier, give you a place to store some of your goods and get yourself established. If you have if you're having trouble with carry weight, you can leave some of the resources behind so you're not lugging them around everywhere. And then the final focus is you'll want to start accumulating skill books. And I usually do this with thievery, and you really don't want to start stealing a lot of items early on unless you have a way to avoid the guard, which can be with, if you have enough horses with horseshoes, you can escape the guard relatively easily. Or if you have a method for turning in characters to the guard, you can reduce your suspicion that way. However, just keep in mind that any character that's turned into the guard stays in jail forever in Extreme. You can't get them out. You can't bail them out of jail. And I did a video recently on how you can use the trade posts via fast travel to reduce your suspicions. So before you start accumulating those skill books through thievery, you'll want to make sure you have a way to avoid the guard. All right. Moving on. These recipes are key recipes to the early game, in my opinion. These are your essentials that you want to look for. You want to hunt them down as quickly as possible because they will make your fights a lot easier, and they can also increase your profits when we get to the trade recipes. But the first recipe I usually hunt down is the mutton stew. This is located, you can get this early on in Tiltron County. After that, it's really up to you which ones you want to get first. Obviously, the pancake is an excellent recipe. However, in order to get the ingredients for the pancake, honey, basically it's honey and grain that it takes to craft the pancake or cook the pancake. You'll have to go to Marheim to get access to honey. So just be prepared. Don't pick up the recipe for the pancake until you're prepared to make the journey to Marheim to go through the border. Marheim, you can get there without paying the border crossing by going through Mount Atlas and dropping pittance down and then going through Ludern region. But personally, I like to avoid Ludern region until a little bit later in the campaign, until I'm ready to go in and do the arena in Ludern, and then I might explore a little bit in there. But Ludern region is a dangerous region, so you want to be very careful trudging through there. I think it's worth it more so to pay the border crossing. That way you have a more direct route into Marheim, and once a border crossing is paid for, you're good to go. But your ingredients for the pancake, you won't have access to it until you get into Marheim. However, once you do go into Marheim, you'll be able to pick up the eel soup, which is an excellent recipe as well. It increases your dexterity for troops. And then not far off from Marheim is the recipe for stuffed cabbage, which increases your critical damage. Another excellent recipe to get early on. And then some of the other ones that you want to look for in the very south of Kortia, you'll be able to find the recipe for porridge and pork stew. And then another good recipe to pick up is just north of Stromcap at the Trader's Hut, which of course is the cabbage perch. This will increase your run duration. It's not essential, but it is really useful, especially if you're stealing things, you want to escape the guard. That's one you'll want to pick up. And then the final recipes that I will mention as well are the seed sausage, broker's table, and mead pike. These are the recipes that will increase your profits of trade. Seed sausage and broker's table you can pick up at the Tavern of Fortune's Maid, which is, of course, aptly named. And then the recipe for mead pike you will find at the Well-Earned Rest Fishery in the far north, just north of Gothenburg. So those are your key recipes. While you're in Gothenburg, I recommend picking up the Braves oil as well. The Braves oil won't come into play until a little bit later on, honestly, because you don't want to be wasting oils on early weapons that are going to be replaced. But once you start picking up weapons that you're going to have for a little while, that's when you start putting the oils on them. And then at that point, you should be ready to start clearing some of the rat nests, which are where you're going to get the components to make the pristine essence, which is the essential ingredient for all of the oils. But while you're in Gothenburg, picking up the seed sausage recipe, the mead pike recipe, the broker's table recipe, visit the apothecary in Gothenburg and scoop up the Braves oil, because in my opinion, it's one of the best ones. There's another really good one in Dromback, but it's a little bit more dangerous to get to, arguably. But the one in Dromback is the immunity oil, which can be very, very useful as well. All right, boys, I hope you found this useful. We are going to cover more of the start in future videos. We're going to go over the camp equipment. In one video, we're going to do another video completely focused on weapons and armor. And then we will also do a video on the camp followers and recruits, where you can find some of the cheap recruits. I'm also going to show you guys where you can get some of the camp followers, characters who won't have an upkeep cost but will have a food cost. They don't participate in any of the battles, but you can have them sitting around the camp, sitting at the campfire, sitting in the tent, helping you generate more valor and more happiness, things like that. You can also put them on the tanning rack in the camp equipment as well. So they do have their uses, and you just have to feed them, essentially. You don't have to pay them. So they're useful to have around. But we'll cover that in a future video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like I said, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys are enjoying the early start guides. I also plan to put together a step-by-step guide to getting through the first stages of the campaign without any deaths. And this is something that's going to take me a little time to work on, because I have an idea for how to go about it, but I'm not 100% that it's going to work. So we're going to try it out. But I'm going to be working on that in the background. We'll be back to the extreme adaptive playthrough very, very soon. There's just one or two more videos that I want to get posted before then. But in the meantime, have a great day. Happy hunting. And I'll see you soon. Otto signing out.